Now, in addition to just these elections, one of the things we're seeing as well is the world recognize how much of a bad negotiator Donald Trump is and how weak he is and how Donald Trump has just been capitulating and or announcing fake deals. When Donald Trump got outmaneuvered by China, that was a watershed moment where Trump claimed he had a deal with China last week after meetings in Switzerland, but obviously there wasn't a deal. They reached a consensus where the United States completely caved and withdrew 145% tariffs that Trump said was going to make America so rich and moved it to 30%. Also, you dig into the fine print of, not even the fine print, just the big print of Trump's purported deal with the UK, not a real deal at all. It actually says this is not a real, it says it's not an actual binding deal, but what it would do is give significant advantages to Jaguar, Land Rover, and Rolls-Royce over American car manufacturers. So the whole world is seeing that. Also, Moody's, the credit agency, downgraded the U.S. Credit score for the first time in Moody's history since 1917. The world sees all of that. And right now, China-U.S. trade truce, that's how Bloomberg calls it, more like capitulation by the U.S., prompts all of these other nations to consider tougher tactics against Donald Trump. Quote, there are many countries that may learn from China that the correct way to negotiate with Trump is to stand firm, remain calm, and force him to capitulate. Now, right before the markets open this morning, we see that the Treasury futures are in a steep decline after Moody's cut the U.S. credit rating. Bonds getting drilled right now, as Spencer Akimian puts it at the open. 4.53% is the 10-year yield. Is that going to hit a 5 handle soon? That's what I'm going to be focused on. When I say 5 handle, I mean 5%. And this is going to impact everything from causing mortgage rates to skyrocket. It's going to make it very difficult for the United States to refinance its debt. And this disastrous budget deal, or this budget bill rather, that Trump is pushing through, it's going to add about $6 trillion to the deficit. And it just last night, very late last night, was approved by the Budget Committee on a vote of 17-16, with those 4 previous no votes abstaining and just not voting. But it passed the Budget Committee by 1 vote. It now goes through the next steps. But we're seeing as well the markets, at least the futures, which is when I'm recording this, showing a steep decline as well on the news of Moody's downgrading the United States credit. Now, this would be something, this would be a time where you'd want real leadership, right? Nope, not from Donald Trump. All throughout yesterday, he was posting weird memes of himself holding swords that he reposted from QAnon death cult accounts like Spiritual Street Fighter 17. That account says, I support QAnon, is basically what it says. So Trump keeps reposting QAnon death cult stuff. He also was posting weird videos of himself. I guess he was so self-conscious of the fact that Bruce Springsteen was mocking him or criticizing him for the disaster he's caused to Americans. Trump was posting weird AI images of himself playing fake music in front of a fake crowd. Very bizarre behavior indeed. And then Donald Trump was posting calls for military tribunals to put former President Obama on military tribunals. Also repost from those QAnon accounts. I mean, look, this is a demented sicko, a vile piece of trash, a felon, a fraud, a sexual abuser who behaves like a maniac. You know, would you be like, oh my God, Jeffrey Dahmer? He's eating people. He's a mass murderer. Well, he's a disgusting, vile murderer. That's who he is. When you look at Donald Trump, he is a criminal felon, fraud, bankrupter. He behaves as such. There's a reason that people like Donald Trump should be locked up in prison for the rest of their lives, in my opinion, and not running a country. We're seeing the effects of this right now. And then surrounding themselves with other vile and despicable individuals like the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's worth basically $1 billion, who previously lived in this is how weird these people are, in a real world, a real life version of the Pink Barbie mansion. That's where he lived. And here, he was doing the morning shows yesterday, blaming former President Biden for the reason that Donald Trump was taking bribes from Qatar. Play the clip.
It sends the wrong message. It sends the wrong message and raises concerns ethically, raises concerns constitutionally, and about security. Why is it appropriate for the president to accept a $400 million jet from Qatar?
Well, it's not the president accepted, it would be the United States government. And Senator Mullins said this weekend that the talks had actually begun under the Biden administration. So, but Kristen, what I can tell you is I think this is a off-ramp for many in the media not to acknowledge what an incredible trip this was. That President Trump has brought back trillions of investments in the United States. Every stop we made, that the enthusiasm in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates to invest in the United States, that they want to push more and more their funds here. And if we go back to your initial question on the Moody's downgrades, who cares? Qatar doesn't, Saudi doesn't, UAE doesn't. They're all pushing money in. They've made 10-year investment plans. So this administration, we're doing peace deals, trade deals, and tax deals.
Now, also on the morning shows, though, you had a former Vice President, Mike Pence, who was actually very critical of Donald Trump taking gifts from Saudi Arabia, which supported 9/11, Qatar, which supports Hamas. Here's what Pence had to say yesterday. Play this clip.
Going to accept a $400 million luxury jet from Qatar to use as a temporary Air Force One. He said he'll eventually donate that to his presidential library. Do you think President Trump should accept a military aircraft from Qatar?
Well, I think first we've got to remember who Qatar is. We've got a military base there. I have members of our immediate family that have deployed to the region. But Qatar has a long history of playing both sides. They support Hamas. They supported Al-Qaeda. Qatar has actually financed pro-Hamas protests on American campuses across the United States. And so the very idea that we would accept an Air Force One from Qatar, I think, is inconsistent with our security, with our intelligence needs, and my hope is the president reconsiders it.
And here Pence talks about how despicable it is for Donald Trump to be in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, questioning attacking United States leadership in the world in Saudi Arabia. Here, play this clip.
Kristen, I've never been a fan of American presidents criticizing America on foreign soil. And to have the president in Saudi Arabia questioning America's global war on terror and describing it as nation building and interventionist, I thought was a disservice to generations of Americans who wore the uniform, who took the fight to our enemy in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Particularly giving that speech in Saudi Arabia, where 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers hailed from, and not including Osama bin Laden, I thought was unfortunate.
Now, let me just show you what the Democrats were saying. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, here's what he had to say. Play this clip.
Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East, my view is the overall narrative here was selling out U.S. national interests for the private gain of his family business. He essentially gave away the crown jewels of American AI and semiconductor technology to the Gulf. In exchange, it looks like, for a $2 billion investment in the Trump family stablecoin venture.
I did a whole other video about this, but let me just say it at the end of this video. Of course, our heart goes out to President Biden and his family after that horrible cancer diagnosis. We did a whole. It was a very tough one for me to get through that video I did yesterday, and our deepest heartfelt sympathy. What just send